They say people reveal their true nature in crisis. But sometimes the real mask drop doesn't come in a hurricane or a fire. It comes when the room is decorated with gold balloons, when people are clapping, and when you're standing in the center thinking you've made it to the end of the tunnel. That's what I thought. I believed I was closing a chapter after 30 years of government work, finally stepping into the quiet I had earned. The auditorium was packed. My face was on a projector behind me, grinning in black and white, younger, sharper. The podium was wrapped in navy blue cloth. There was a cake, 3 tiers, customized with the agency's logo, little edible wires and motherboards made of fondant. I remember that cake more clearly than my own wedding. It was all lined up picture perfect. And then it shattered. My son, Ethan, stood beside me, hands in his pockets, chewing on his lip. He hadn't said much all day. He hadn't said much the last 3 months. I thought he was just adjusting to adulthood pressure, maybe depression. His shoulders were too tense for a 24-year-old. But right as I slid the cake knife through the frosting, he leaned in close, like he was going to thank me. Instead, he dropped a sentence so quietly it took a second to register. "Dad, I never wanted this life." He didn't blink, didn't flinch, just straightened up and stepped back like he'd handed me a grenade with the pin already pulled. And before I could form a word, before I could even ask, the microphone screeched. And she was already up there. My wife. In heels, yes, though I won't romanticize it. She wasn't regal. She wasn't glowing. She looked like someone showing up for a contract killing. Controlled, calculated. Her hair was up, but not in any loving tribute to the occasion. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes were too awake. She tapped the mic once. No jokes. No, "I love you," or "he's my rock," or any of the canned garbage people spill at events like this. She didn't even smile. "There's a truth about my husband's past that needs to be heard," she said. That's it. No build-up. No warning. Just that sentence. Clear. Sharp. Like she'd rehearsed it hundreds of times. The room didn't gasp. It froze. Laughter died midair. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. I looked around and suddenly saw people noticing things. The security at the door, twice the usual. The way the cameras in the corner had been re-angled slightly inward. The man by the window in a suit too stiff, eyes too busy. None of that had registered before. Then the alarms triggered. Sirens, mechanical, low-pitched, began to echo. Red strobes spun. The doors slammed with such precision it felt like an execution, not a party. 2 agents I hadn't seen all evening emerged from opposite ends of the room, not running, just walking deliberately. One of them carried a matte black folder. Wide. Sealed. Top secret stamped in deep red. He placed it on the table beside the cake. The folder had my name on it. No one moved. I looked at my wife and she didn't look away. No panic. No guilt. Just anticipation. As if she'd been waiting for this. Not the consequence, the reveal. As if she enjoyed being the match dropped onto the oil spill. And then I saw Ethan again. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't even scared. He looked relieved. That was the first crack. I didn't speak. I just reached for the folder. And just like that, everything I believed I was, everything I believed I'd built, came apart before I even opened the cover. The folder didn't weigh much. That's what struck me first. For something that had stopped the room cold, it felt light. Too light. But the moment my fingers touched it, I knew it wasn't the pages inside that carried weight. It was the intent. I opened it. The first thing I saw wasn't paper. It was a photograph. Color. Grainy, like it had been scanned and reprinted a dozen times. In the photo, a younger version of me, at least 15 years younger, sat across a cafe table from a man I recognized instantly, though I hadn't thought of him in over a decade. Yuri Kalenkov. Former Russian cyber intelligence officer. Presumed dead. Or so I was told. I flipped the photo over. My name. The date. The location, Warsaw. Beneath it, a transcript. Dozens of pages. Time-stamped. Word for word. Every conversation we'd had, going back years. Not just work-related. Private things. Personal. Things no one outside my household should have known. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. A leak. But then I saw the signature on the last page. Mine. I don't remember signing anything like that. Ever. The room blurred around me. Not from fear, from calculation. My mind was already sprinting through every trip I took, every connection, every encrypted message that might have been rerouted or misinterpreted. I looked up. My wife was watching me. Not like someone watching a tragedy. Like someone waiting for confirmation. That's when I realized this wasn't a discovery. It was a plan. And I wasn't the author of it. The agent standing beside me, I didn't know his name, but I knew the type, gave a small nod as if to say, keep going. And I did. The next file was worse. Financials. Bank transfers. All in my name, all connected to shell accounts in places I'd never even been. It was meticulous. Beautifully so. Almost too perfect. My own signature forged with such accuracy that even I had to double-take. Then came the third file, the blow that knocked the wind out of me. It was a letter. Not to me. From me. Or someone writing as me. Addressed to Ethan. In it I admitted to lying. To secrets. To burying truth under clearance codes and deniability. I told him I had set his path, designed his future, shaped his life not for his good, but for control. The words were brutal. Clinical. Cold. And they sounded exactly like something I would say if I had ever decided to become a stranger to my own son. Ethan wouldn't meet my eyes. That confirmed it. He'd read it before. I stood. Not quickly. Just enough to create movement in a room that had turned to stone. I walked toward her. And I asked, loud enough for the whole room to hear, how long have you been building this? Her lips twitched. Not a smile, a smirk trying to escape. I didn't build it, she said. I just stopped hiding it. There were no theatrics. No apology. She turned to the crowd, lifted a hand and spoke like a keynote speaker. My husband has lived a double life for over a decade. He's manipulated foreign contacts, used his position to create shadow operations and weaponized his own family to maintain a spotless image. People were filming now. Phones out. Eyes wide. She continued. What none of you knew, what I couldn't keep pretending not to know, was that Mark wasn't just lying to the agency. He was lying to all of us. Even to himself. I wasn't angry yet. That came later. What I felt was something much colder, the slow, mechanical clicking of gears as my life rotated away from everything I thought it was. And somewhere deep in that clicking, a realization surfaced. This wasn't about government secrets. This was personal. They escorted me out of the hall through a side corridor, not handcuffed, not under arrest, but with just enough control that it was clear I was no longer in command of my own narrative. My badge was deactivated before I even reached the end of the hallway. The building's internal system had already reclassified me as a level 3 integrity risk. That's what the screen said when I tried to swipe into the elevator. 3 decades of clearance vaporized in seconds. In a private room, 2 agents asked me to wait. They didn't speak. Didn't offer water. Didn't tell me who was coming. I didn't ask. I used the time to study the folder again. Details. Fonts. Paper texture. I wasn't looking for what it said, I was looking for how it was built. That folder was real, but it wasn't true. Whoever constructed it had access to real logs, real agency formatting, and an unsettling level of psychological precision. Whoever they were, they didn't want to kill my reputation, they wanted to invert it. Not destroy my name, but distort it until it became unrecognizable. That kind of attack? It isn't personal vengeance. It's strategic. And it needs help from the inside. So I thought about her. Not the woman I married. The woman who took the microphone. The one who stood in front of everyone and detonated a decade's worth of loyalty in a single sentence. And the longer I sat there, the more pieces clicked into place because this wasn't spontaneous. This had been prepared. Coordinated. And if she'd planned this, she hadn't done it alone. That's when I remembered the dinner 2 months earlier. It was a small gathering, her friends mostly. She'd insisted I come even though I had a critical audit coming up. I gave in. Said fine. One night, she played the perfect host. Wine flowed. Laughter came easy. But there was one man, a guest I didn't recognize. Said he was a consultant. Spoke too confidently. Watched me too closely. Asked about old operations like they were inside jokes. I'd flagged it in my mind then, but let it go. That man? I saw him again. This morning. On the agency's internal login attempt tracker. He tried to access my terminal 4 times. Under a proxy ID. I hadn't had time to investigate. I made a note. Now I was paying for that delay. The door opened. Not an agent. Not a handler. Ethan. He looked older than he should. Not physically. Spiritually. Like someone who had seen too much too soon and hadn't had the tools to process it. He sat across from me without a word. His fingers were shaking, just slightly, and he folded them under the table to hide it. I waited. He didn't look at me. He looked past me. His voice was flat when it finally came. She showed me the documents 6 weeks ago. Said you'd deny everything. Said you were trained to lie so well you'd convince even yourself. She's lying, I said. Everything she gave you, it was engineered. Layered with just enough truth to make it believable. But none of it is real. His eyes flicked to mine, and for a second I saw the boy I'd raised. The one who used to sit on the floor with circuit boards trying to build his own radio. The one who had trusted me with his first heartbreak, his first failure. But he didn't speak from that place. He spoke from a place she'd poisoned. You said Mom didn't need to know everything, he said. You said it was for her safety. It was. And me? Was it for my safety too? That's when I realized this wasn't about documents or covert operations or falsified reports. This was about what I didn't say. The years I spent in silence. The moments I thought I was protecting them by keeping them out of the darker layers of my work. And she'd used that silence like a blade. She told me, you built my whole life. Picked my college. Paid off the admissions board. Bought my internship slot with federal leverage. Is that true? No. But even I could hear the hesitation. Because some of it, maybe not the worst of it, but enough, was partially true. I had made sure doors opened. I thought I was helping. I thought I was guiding. But to Ethan, all he heard now was control. All he saw was a blueprint he hadn't drawn, a life sculpted in my image without his consent. That's what she gave him, not just forged files. She gave him the illusion of freedom. He stood up slowly, looked down at me with something between pity and disgust. I think I need time, he said. And I think you need to stop pretending you didn't build this. When he left, he didn't close the door behind him. I sat in that silence and realized this wasn't the end of a marriage. This was the start of a war. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't go home either. I sat in the agency's secure debriefing room, alone. They told me I wasn't under arrest. Not yet. But I wasn't allowed to leave the premises. Internal review would be opening a full investigation in the morning. For now, I was simply contained. It was the kind of language we used for unstable systems, servers compromised by malware, AI prototypes that started rewriting their own code. They were treating me like a corrupted program. I kept going over the folder, page by page, again and again, not looking for what was said, but what was missing. Somewhere inside this fabricated masterpiece, there had to be a crack. And then I saw it. A memo near the end. Titled, Transfer Protocol D14, Privileged Override. It wasn't the content that grabbed me, it was the timestamp. A tiny line of metadata in the corner left on the PDF's render printout. Something no one outside IT would even notice. It was created not from an internal agency machine, but from her laptop. The signature was there. Her device ID. Her device. She hadn't scrubbed it well enough. That was the moment the narrative flipped. If she created that file, that document that claimed to be evidence against me, then the entire thing, every financial log, every conversation had been rerouted through her hardware before landing in the agency's hands. That meant it was filtered, modified, weaponized. But that still didn't answer the why. So I did what they didn't expect. I requested a digital trace of her terminal through emergency marital privilege. The agency still had protocols for couples working within or adjacent to the field, and I still had the clearance, at least until the morning. They gave me 15 minutes before system lockdown reclassified me as a threat actor. I used every second. Her recent access history was encrypted, of course. But one address was visible in plain text. It was a name I hadn't seen in 6 years, Thomas Greer. He wasn't just a colleague. He was my recruit. I pulled him out of a tech startup in San Diego, mentored him through his first clearance. We spent years together running secure communications ops overseas. He was brilliant, fast, and loyal. Or so I thought. He'd vanished after an internal dispute. Filed a transfer request, went off-grid, supposedly working in deep protocol reconstruction for the agency's Black Archive division. But no one ever really saw him again. Now his name was in my wife's terminal logs. 4 entries. The last one, just 3 days ago. I stared at it and something inside me snapped into place. This wasn't her idea. It was his. And she wasn't just helping him. She was in it. Now the betrayal had a new face. Not just hers. A man I trained. A man I trusted like a brother. And she hadn't just lied to me. She'd conspired with someone who knew exactly where my blind spots were. And the final page of the folder? That's when I realized it wasn't a page at all. It was a code. A microprint watermark embedded in the bottom corner. A pattern only visible under low UV light, a trick used for validating top-level documents. I requested a UV scan. The tech didn't ask why. Just ran it. The code revealed 4 letters. GenieX. No definition. No direct match in the system. But I knew what it was. An unlisted protocol. One of the handful of programs that had no public presence, no digital record, no trace, except through deep neural sandboxes only a few handlers had ever touched. And I had been one of them. So why was the code on a page supposedly written about me? Because it wasn't about me. It was about them. This wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was a cover-up.at417 AM I broke protocol. It was instinct, not impulse. A trained kind of rebellion. Every agent has their line, the silent one they swear never to cross. For me, it was always GenieX, a blackline program so classified it didn't officially exist. It wasn't a file. It wasn't even a project. It was an absence in the network. A ghost path with no doorway. But now it had shown up in her file. The code was a trace signature from a decommissioned GenieX relay, a sandbox node once buried in an Eastern European fiber network that only 6 people in the world had ever accessed. 5 of them were dead. I was the sixth. So I did the one thing I wasn't supposed to. I forced a backdoor into my own restricted log. I built it years ago in case someone tried to wipe my name off the system or use my credentials without my knowledge. Now I wasn't looking for access. I was looking for proof of manipulation. The GeneX code had been activated 39 days ago. Origin IP? Not Russia. Not China. Not even a third party. It was a domestic relay from an address registered under a T. Greer LLC cloaked as a risk management firm in Annapolis. It all circled back to Thomas. He hadn't disappeared. He'd evolved. Gone private. Built his own information infrastructure using pieces of our old system, fragments of what I taught him. He'd spent years off the radar, sharpening knives I'd handed him in trust. And now he was using my wife to bury the blade. I couldn't go to internal review. They were compromised. The fact that her evidence was even allowed into a formal report meant someone upstairs was greased or scared. And Ethan? Ethan had become a casualty of emotional sabotage. She'd taken his fear, his resentment, his longing to be free of my shadow and wrapped it in the one thing no son can resist, the illusion of moral superiority. So I did what I always do when I'm cornered. I prepared a trap. I contacted an old operator, Fiona Keys. Retired. Off-grid. She ran field diagnostics and intel filtration in early GeneX days before she ghosted out of agency life. We hadn't spoken in years, not since the Jakarta standoff. But I knew she owed me. I saved her brother from a chemical backtrace op that went sideways in Tunisia. Fiona didn't ask questions. Just answered on the third ring and said, "How deep?" "Beyond jurisdiction," I said. "Is the leak emotional or structural?" "Both. And the origin is someone I trained." There was silence. Then, a short sigh. "Where's the wife?" "In the middle. Or the engine?" "I don't know yet." "Then you need to see the ledger." "What ledger?" GeneX didn't just catalog foreign infiltration patterns. It also flagged anomalies in domestic loyalty drift. "You were on that list once." "Not flagged. Monitored." "Your wife was too." I froze. "What are you talking about?" "She didn't enter your life by accident. They started looking at her years ago, before your elevation. Before Ethan. She was tagged as a relational anchor candidate." My mouth went dry. "You're saying she was placed?" "No. I'm saying she was steered. Pushed into your path. Then watched. Groomed. Like a sleeper, except emotional, not ideological. When Greer disappeared, she stopped showing up in scans. That's not coincidence. It felt like vertigo. 30 years of marriage manipulated? Not just by her, but by the system? Everything I believed about my past, about the choice to marry her, raise Ethan, build this life, all of it might have been a carefully nudged simulation. And now it was imploding. Fiona sent me a private access key. Time limited. 48 minutes. A route into a mirror GeneX archive buried in a now-defunct node in Malta. A backup that was never supposed to exist. She said it was the last trace of the original ledger. "If what you're saying is true," she said, "the final file in that ledger won't just name Greer. It'll name her role." I logged in. And the last file wasn't a report. It was a video. Timestamp, January 2001. 17 days before our engagement. The feed showed a small office. Soundless. My wife, younger, smiling, sitting across from a handler. He slid her a file. She opened it and nodded. Then she signed something. She signed into something. That was the moment I stopped being angry. Because now I wasn't dealing with betrayal. I was dealing with recruitment. The video ran for 7 minutes. No sound. Just grainy, static-tinted footage of a woman who looked like the version of my wife I remembered falling in love with, bright-eyed, deliberate, a little guarded but hungry for something bigger than what she came from. I'd always thought I met her at a systems conference in Chicago. That story? The long conversation over espresso, the debate over network integrity in failing state territories, it wasn't fiction. But it wasn't chance either. Now I was watching the scene before that scene. The prelude. She was approached by a handler from Section 4A Psychological Vector Analysis. His face wasn't visible, but I knew the style. I'd worked in a neighboring branch. These weren't recruiters. These were architects. She didn't seem confused. Or intimidated. She looked expectant. She opened the file. Read for 30 seconds. Nodded once. Then reached for the pen. The agreement she signed wasn't a contract. It was an intent file, an internal classification used for civilians flagged as potential assets through emotional leverage. They weren't agents. They weren't even informants. They were something worse, relational operatives. The handler leaned forward, said something I couldn't hear. She smiled. The camera zoomed slightly, catching just enough of the documents heading to make my heart lock up. Subject objective, reinforcement of Target 6X219's psychological compliance through emotional anchoring. Target 6X219? That was me. She had agreed, knowingly, willingly, to enter a long-term emotional alignment operation. They chose her because her psychological profile meshed with mine at a 93% manipulability rate. And she had agreed because of what they offered her. That part came later in the scanned attachment. She didn't just get agency protection. She got leverage. She was promised post-deployment assets, immunity from audit, and this is where it turned: autonomous access to any behavioral collateral produced during the assignment. Behavioral collateral. That's what they called Ethan. He wasn't a bystander. He wasn't just the child of two parents, one of whom had become bitter and vindictive. He was engineered collateral. The video ended. I sat in the dark, breathing like I'd run a marathon through a blizzard. This was no longer about a marriage falling apart. This was a designed collapse, a pre-written breakdown that had matured like a time bomb. Her silence. Her timing. Even the moment at the retirement party, it wasn't just to ruin me. It was scheduled. But what hit me harder than all of that was this. Ethan didn't know. He thought he was choosing sides. He believed he was rejecting manipulation, walking away from control. But he'd been steered since before he could speak. The decisions I thought I made for his good? They were shaped by pressure points she subtly amplified. Fears I didn't know I had. Regrets I couldn't name. And now, because of it, he believed I was the villain. So I did something reckless. I called him. It rang. And rang. And rang. Then somehow he answered. Dad? His voice was tired. Defensive. Why are you calling me? I didn't try to justify anything. I didn't plead. I just asked him one question. Do you remember the red folder Mom kept in her closet? The one she never let you open. Silence. Check it. He didn't respond, but I heard his breathing shift. Heard him moving. Then a long pause. And finally his voice. Smaller this time. What is this? Everything she never wanted you to see. I hung up before he could ask more. I didn't want to explain it to him over the phone. I wanted him to see it. To feel it. Inside that folder were early drafts. Not of letters or plans, but of scripts. Suggested phrases. Engineered confrontations. Notes from her handler about how to introduce distance between me and Ethan. Every family dinner that turned cold. Every argument that spun out of nowhere. Manufactured. And Ethan, poor Ethan, he had been reading from a script someone gave to his mother 2 decades ago. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I waited. Somewhere between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m., I knew Ethan had opened the folder. It was the kind of knowing that comes not from logic, but from the deep, chemical connection that doesn't break, no matter how many engineered lies are pumped into it. A father knows. And what he found wasn't just proof of deception. It was context. The folder had been sealed since 2014, tucked behind old photo albums under false bank statements next to wedding photos she never hung. It contained drafts of conversations. Observational logs. Questions she was told to ask me repeatedly in subtle variation. Do you ever regret joining the agency? Do you think Ethan has the same instincts you had? Should we consider moving somewhere safer? They were never real questions. They were probes. Data collection through intimacy. Each page was marked with small blue stamps. Her handler's initials, T.G. Greer. She had left breadcrumbs. Not because she was careless, but because she never thought she'd lose control of the narrative. And when I saw her car pull up to Ethan's apartment just before dawn, I knew that moment had come. I watched from across the street, sitting in a borrowed car, blackout plates engaged. She went inside quickly, no hesitation. I waited. 9 minutes later, Ethan stormed out. Alone. I followed him at a distance. He didn't go far. A park. Empty, covered benches. He didn't sit. Just stood there, phone in hand, shaking. I stepped out of the car. He turned when he heard my footsteps. His face was pale, his expression unreadable, but the folder was in his hands. I read it, he said. I waited. I read all of it. Still, I said nothing. She said it was fake. That you planted it. That it's part of some last-ditch effort to make her look like the manipulator. And what did you believe? He didn't answer immediately. She said she only did it because she loved me. That they told her you were dangerous. That you'd eventually collapse and she needed to protect me. I stepped closer. Looked him dead in the eye. And what do you believe? He didn't flinch. I think, he said slowly, that she never expected me to find out she was writing letters to Greer while telling me you were the one who lied about everything. I took a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. Then he asked the question that burned deeper than all the others. Were you dangerous? I could have told him no. I could have given him the tired speech about sacrifice, duty, protecting the homeland, all the phrases I'd recited 100 times in briefings. But I didn't. I looked him in the face, my own son, and said, I was necessary. He nodded. And that's when everything changed. That's when we changed. Not into the perfect father-son team. Not into allies. but into two men who had been played for decades by the same lie and who now understood who had dealt the cards. That same morning I made the call. Not to the agency. Not to internal review. To Fiona. I want to activate the mirror. She didn't speak for a long time. When she did, her voice was colder than I'd ever heard. That protocol was dismantled after Prague. Rebuild it. It'll burn everything. I didn't hesitate. Good. The mirror was a fail-dead-man mechanism, a leak trigger built into the GNX system in case of deep infiltration by domestic agents. If activated, it would dump every file, every conversation, every asset assignment to a cold storage relay accessible only by legacy authentication. And it would name names. If my wife's recruitment was tied to a wider infiltration and now I was certain it was activating, the mirror would shine a spotlight so wide it wouldn't just expose her. It would expose the system that allowed her. But there was one catch. To activate it, I had to physically access a dead GNX server in Maine. Buried underground. Decommissioned. Off-grid. No remote entry. So that's where I went. And I didn't go alone. The GNX server facility in Maine was never meant to be visited again. It had been decommissioned 12 years ago after an internal risk protocol flagged contamination in the personnel hierarchy, meaning someone on the inside was already compromised even back then. The agency didn't purge it. They buried it. Literally. They shut the power, flooded the upper tunnel with concrete, and rerouted all backups to ghost archives in Europe. Officially, it no longer existed. But I remembered the layout. And Fiona? She remembered the manual override routes. It was a 7-hour drive from Ethan's apartment. We didn't speak for the first 2. The silence wasn't hostile. It was processing. The kind of silence that fills the space between two people when everything they believed about family has turned inside out. At hour 3, Ethan finally asked, "Did you know about the mirror back when I was a kid?" "Yes." "You knew it could blow up the entire system?" "It was designed to do exactly that." "And you didn't use it when you found out about Mom?" "She wasn't the system." He nodded slowly. "But she's part of it." Now we understood each other. When we reached the entrance, the forest was eerily still. The hatch was buried beneath layers of earth, disguised under a rusted-out telecom access sign. It hadn't been opened since 2013. I used the original pressure sequence, 4 short presses, too long. The mechanical whine of decaying hydraulics echoed beneath the surface. The hatch rose. The descent was steep. Stale air, metal walls covered in layers of dust and old corrosion. The emergency power line flickered to life, revealing the long, cold tunnel. At the bottom, the door to server room 7 was sealed, but the code hadn't changed. I typed it in, R219, Fathom 0X. The door hissed open. Inside, the facility looked like a sarcophagus. Dead servers lined the walls. Dust lay thick over glass cabinets, and the air was heavy with the smell of long-failed ventilation. At the far end, a single analog terminal sat under a protective dome. The mirror console. I approached it. Ethan stayed near the door, quiet. Watching. The boot-up was manual. 256-bit rotating key required. I'd memorized it 2 decades ago. No one else alive could activate it. The screen flared to life. GNX, mirror initiated, enter command. I hesitated, then typed, run full purge. The screen paused. Warning, system detonation will unlock unredacted profiles. Are you sure? Before I could confirm, Ethan's voice behind me. Dad. I turned. He was staring at the far wall. At a sealed panel I hadn't noticed. It wasn't part of the original architecture. I crossed the room and wiped away the dust. A plate. Bolted shut. Newer than the rest. It had no digital lock, just 4 manual clamps. I undid them one by one. Behind the plate was a small black case. Inside it, a drive. A handwritten label. Deadwife Protocol, Echo Final 1.3. There was also a photo. My wife. Sitting at this very terminal. Years younger. Eyes hollow. A man behind her, Greer. Hand on her shoulder. Holding her steady. Ethan stared at the picture. What is this? I didn't answer. I slotted the drive into the console. It booted automatically. What we saw next didn't make sense at first. It was a series of recordings. Logs. Internal debriefs from Greer to his superior. Describing a containment scenario. Subject E will be kept close. Emotional rupture must remain unresolved until phase closure. Agent wife to be burned post-transfer. No return clearance. Termination window 60 days post-retirement of subject 6X219. Termination. She was never supposed to survive this. Greer had played her too. She wasn't the final villain. She was just the longest burning fuse. And she was supposed to detonate long before any of this reached the surface. The drive ended with a memo stamped confidential. If Agent Wife initiates deviation, trigger proxy kill under Operation Hollow Branch. Activate Ethan as live tether. Collateral must be sacrificed if subject 6x219 re-engages. I turned to Ethan. He wasn't breathing. They were going to use me, he whispered. As a trigger? Yes. They were going to kill her. They still might. We stared at each other across the flickering room. And without saying it aloud, we both knew. We were no longer trying to survive. We were going to finish this. We didn't drive back the way we came. We burned the car 5 miles from the facility in an abandoned ranger station and hiked through old maintenance trails until we reached a satellite extraction point Fiona arranged. She sent a man I didn't know, silent, broad-shouldered, ex-Marine type with old scars and no questions. He handed us burner phones, a backpack with thermal cloaks, and coordinates. Fiona said to tell you this is your one and only reset, he said. You use it, it's done. No coming back. I don't want back, I said. I want forward. We rode in silence to the safe house, a split-level shell hidden under the false front of a bait and tackle shop. On the drive, Ethan finally spoke. So if Hollow Branch is still active? It is. And they were planning to kill her. They failed. Because she didn't follow orders. Then she's still a target. That means they're going to finish the job. Yes. And you want to stop them? No, I said without blinking. I want them to try. I explained the plan. Hollow Branch didn't fear exposure. It thrived on its own invisibility, layers of forged missions, rewritten archives, and human debris like my wife and me. But they had one weak point, Greer. He had gone off script. That much was now clear. Whatever leash he was on, he'd cut it, and now he was freelancing off an infrastructure that couldn't fully control him anymore. That made him dangerous. Desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. I reached out to Fiona again. Asked for one thing, a list of all known contacts connected to Hollow Branch operations within the last 3 years. She sent back a name I didn't expect. Avery Lang. Internal auditor. Mid-level. Quiet. Too clean. She had no field experience, no operational command. But her signature appeared 3 times in post-operation sign-offs involving agent terminations that never made it into the final records. And she had just requested a domestic travel clearance to my city. Scheduled for tomorrow. Ethan and I flew back overnight using a transport window Fiona secured. No ID, no trace. When we landed, I didn't go home. I went to hers. My wife was still alive. She looked older. Frayed. Her hair was uncombed. The fire that once lived in her was there again, but it burned differently now, not with purpose, but with cornered exhaustion. She opened the door, stared at me, then slowly stepped aside. You found the file, she said. Not a question. A statement. I found what Greer promised you, I said. And what he promised someone else when he decided you weren't useful anymore. She walked into the living room. Didn't offer coffee. Didn't ask questions. Just sat on the floor, legs folded beneath her, like a woman waiting for either confession or execution. He told me you'd snap eventually, she said. That your paranoia would rot you from the inside. That Ethan needed to be saved from that. I believed him. For a long time. He didn't lie about that part, I said. I was a shadow. I lived in things no family should have to orbit. But you turned orbit into surveillance. I was afraid. You were rewarded. She didn't deny it. Then she looked up. Her eyes weren't defiant anymore. They're going to kill me, aren't they? Not if you help me kill the program first. A beat of silence. She blinked. You're still the same. You always turn betrayal into mission structure. This isn't a mission. This is closure. But not just for me. I handed her the burner phone. On it, a time, a location, and a name. Avery Lang. She read it. Her expression changed. Cold recognition. She signed off on Jakarta, she whispered. She's field now. She's here now. We needed bait. And my wife, the original asset, was the only thing that would bring Lang into the open. The plan was simple. A public location. Controlled environment. Surveillance setup handled by Fiona's contact. Lang would come to close the loop. My wife would show weakness, fear. She'd offer compliance. Submission. Everything a cleaner like Lang needed to feel comfortable. And then I would be waiting. Ethan, watching from a distance, asked only one thing before we moved. What are you going to do if it's a kill order? I won't let it reach her, I said. Why? Because she broke her programming. She deserves to see what she was part of burn. The cafe was a converted train station. Glass roof. Open floor plan. One entrance. One exit. We chose it precisely because of how exposed it was, nothing to hide behind, nothing to ambush from. If Lang wanted a clean kill, she'd have to do it dirty. My wife sat at the center table. No disguise. No sunglasses. No wig. She wore the same gray coat she used to wear on agency training weekends, the one she claimed made her feel just invisible enough. Now, she looked fragile, hands folded, shoulders hunched, eyes darting like a woman who was ready to run but had nowhere left to go. We were wired for audio. I sat in the van 2 blocks away. Ethan was posted across the street with line of sight, a camera lens tucked into a false maintenance panel. Fiona's man, silent as ever, stood in the alley, hand on a pulse scrambler that would block any signal attempting to reroute her termination order once Lang arrived. At 9:37 a.m. Avery Lang stepped out of a rideshare car. She wore a navy coat, neutral makeup. Her hair was down. She looked like someone going to brunch, not someone assigned to end the final thread in a black operation gone rogue. She entered the cafe, sat down without a greeting. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," my wife said. Lang didn't smile. "There's nothing to agree on. You're a liability. I'm here to verify your cooperation. And if I don't cooperate?" Lang's lips twitched. "You're already dead. I'm just here to file the timestamp." I pressed the mic. "Now." Fiona's man hit the scrambler. Inside, Lang flinched. Her earpiece buzzed and cut out. Static filled her line. For a second, she looked human, startled. Off balance. That's when my wife moved. Fast. Precise. She grabbed Lang's hand, the one reaching for her coat pocket, and slammed it against the table. Not enough to break it. Enough to send a message. "I was loyal longer than anyone," she hissed. "And this is how they repay me?" Lang tried to stand, but she froze when I walked through the front door. She didn't know I was in country. She definitely didn't know I was alive, off-grid, and 2 steps ahead of her clearance. "Sit," I said. Lang sat. "You're here under Hollow Branch's post-closure directive. You've been authorized to silence anyone tied to the legacy recruitment grid. That includes me, her, and my son." Lang's jaw tightened. "You shouldn't be able to access this protocol. Neither should Greer. And yet here we are." I placed a file in front of her. Inside, proof of Greer's post-Hollow Branch movements. His fabrication of the final Echo 1.3 protocol. His unauthorized conditioning of Ethan. The false reports. The stolen data rerouted through his proxy firms. And the kill order he signed for her. Lang didn't even blink. "He said you were unstable," she said. "He wasn't wrong," I replied. "But unstable people make terrible targets. We have nothing to lose." Lang leaned back, studied me, then looked at my wife. "You think this redeems you?" "No," my wife said. "But it exposes you." That's when Ethan entered the cafe, walked straight to Lang, dropped a USB drive on the table. It contained the video from the main server, the original file, decrypted, cleaned, processed. 3 copies, he said. 1 to the press. 1 to the International Watchdog Archive. 1 to every agency head still breathing. Lang stared at the drive. Her hand twitched. She could have gone for the gun. But she didn't. She knew the system wouldn't protect her anymore. She was isolated. Lang stood, smoothed her coat, left the cafe without a word. We didn't follow. We didn't need to. It was over. Not cleanly. Not beautifully. But completely. We watched the fallout unfold over the next 72 hours. Emergency resignations. Sealed indictments. A wave of sanctioned disappearances that swept through the darkest corners of the agency's inner crust. Greer never resurfaced. Lang did 2 months later. Found in a hotel room in Brussels. Unmarked. No violence. Just gone. And my wife? She left. Not quietly, but with intention. 1 last note folded on the counter. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even asking for understanding. I just needed you to know. I tried to love you through all of it, but somewhere along the way I forgot which part of me was real. Ethan and I live in different cities now. We talk once a week. He's rebuilding his life from zero, and this time it's actually his. As for me, I live off-grid. No name. No trace. No records. But I remember everything. And if you're reading this, know this. The most dangerous betrayals don't happen in the dark. They happen when someone turns on the lights and smiles. Mark R. Former target 6x219. Status free.